Thanks for joining us for One More Thing. I'm Pastor Brett Watson. I'm here with Pastor Troy. We're going to talk about the first in the series AI. Mm-hmm. Fantastic, man.
Thanks,
I loved it.
Thanks,
loved
man.
And Kyle, I know you had a big part in the video preceding. Yeah,
My man.
If you don't want to even watch the sermon, you got to watch
That video.
I mean, that was side splitting stuff. It was funny.
I don't
Dr.
think I have
Doucet in a wig. Let's just leave it at that. Okay.
I don't think I have any future in Hollywood, man. I can stick to what I'm good at.
I don't know. Maybe comedy stuff. Yeah. So this is I noticed that the creative team titled this. I guess they usually title these things, but they titled this one correctly this time. Wisdom isn't wireless. Mm. I'm not always happy, Kyle, with the way that the sermons are titled. Not that I have any clout, but I just want to let you know. But this one, I thought that's dead on. Wisdom isn't wireless. And so you talked about the reality that wisdom is more than the accumulation of facts, right? Mm-hmm. But it is, the way you put it, it's the formation of a life shaped by truth. Mm-hmm. So good. But then you also talked about the reality that wisdom is forged in community.
Yes.
Not in isolation, right? So I thought that would be a good thing to unpack a little more for people, to maybe with some examples of why that's so.
Yes, I could see how a response to that would be, well, we learn a lot in isolation. You read as a child, you're in school, you're doing homework. But I just recall my dissertation process. This is why you have a committee of 4 individuals who have gone through this rigorous process, because you do read and write in sort of an isolated environment, and it's a very lonely process. Mm-hmm. But that is really just data collection and synthesization and all this stuff. It's when you go to the committee members and say, here's what I have, and they go, we haven't considered this, or that's an excellent point. I've never considered that. So that's sort of the idea. I mean, there's a bunch of cliche things. We bounce ideas off of each other. But
iron sharpens iron.
Exactly. Yeah. The whole notion is that while there is information that can be accumulated in isolation, wisdom is cultivated in community. And that's the way we need to look at it. I don't want to bring up politics, but it's often a fact that many people will just watch one particular strand of political information in isolation, as opposed to the cultivation of diversity of opinions, right?
Yeah.
And in religion, it plays itself out that way as well. I'm only going to hear one particular piece of information about the translation or the interpretation of this scripture. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, man, I wonder what other people say about this. I wonder what other denominations might say about this, other perspectives. And it's just healthy to do that. And people fear that, they're going to change my mind. Well, maybe. But what I tell my students, even in a philosophy class, Brett, is this. I kind of say, I don't care what you believe. I say it a little bit more vulgar terms. I say, I don't give a crap what you believe. Whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, a Buddhist, an atheist, I want you to be the best, whatever you are, at the end of this class. And the only way that happens is if we question those beliefs, not to challenge them or to change them, but so that you have a better understanding of those beliefs. So that you can become a better follower or practitioner of whatever ideology or religion you want to follow. And that's the whole point. And most of that comes from when God rhetorically asked Adam, and that's what we're going to get into this week. But the question he asks at the end is, who told you that? Who told you that? That statement seems to be so disconnected from the truth and the wisdom of who you are that's something you downloaded. from somewhere, some other server, some faulty Wi-Fi connection, So all that just comes to play into that. How I came up with that. Again, it's just a rhetorical term. Wisdom isn't wireless. It's always connected to community, and it's always cultivated in community and not.
How else do you check the accumulation of knowledge if it's not in community? You can't.
That's right.
You can do your best to be to interpret the data that you're collecting, right? But without bouncing it off of other people, how do you?
Yeah,
you can't do it, right? I mean, I thought that was a really good point to bring out, that this has to be done. We grow in wisdom with each other, not in isolation.
Yeah.
I told the folks that came to communion afterwards, like, I'm just going to ask myself, kind of playing off of the idea that the serpent is that which is coiled up in each one of us.
Yeah.
And even has my face on it. Right?
Yeah.
It's a part of me.
Yeah.
That I need to integrate properly, right? And just reject at times, And if I'm gonna point, again, not to be overly political, but if I'm gonna point at someone and decide that I can't be in relationship with you because I know how you voted, okay?
Yeah.
I need to ask myself, and I'm gonna ask myself, is that the serpent?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Because there's a lot of things that we can debate in terms of theology, ecclesiology, whatever, all that stuff, right? You're going to have different interpretations, but it's hard to interpret Jesus' desire for unity other than his desire for unity.
That's right.
Right? And if that's what he wants, so he doesn't say, may they all be one, unless there are real differences over, soteriology.
Yeah.
Or atonement theory,
Right.
or, all these things that we divide over. And that applies to real life too, not just theological life.
That's
right. We don't need to cast each other out, and we lose something really valuable for wisdom, I think, when we cast out those relationships based on, I know this about you. That's knowledge, right?
That's right.
If I know how you voted, then I know how you voted,
That's
right?
right.
And but then if I make a decision to separate myself from you and remove the proximity that we have as friends,
That's right.
then there is no wisdom that springs from that relationship anymore, because the relationship's not there.
That's an unwise move.
It's an unwise move. That's right. Yes.
And that's why I did the little pun on the difference between knowledge and wisdom is the tomato. Knowledge has the data. This is a fruit. Wisdom has the understanding. You don't put it in a fruit salad. And it goes back primarily to this insinuation that there was a artificial belief that Adam had some sort of, or both Adam and Eve, again, they're just representations of humanity as a whole.
Yes.
Like, I lack something. And the only way to achieve the fulfillment or the satisfaction or the contentment is to fulfill that place of lack. And it's a misplaced understanding about lack. It's not a wise, informed understanding. It's I don't have that. I don't have, and again, I'm with you. The serpent is that coiled up sentiment within me, that consciousness within me. I mean, the old proverbial angel, devil on your shoulder in the cartoons. You don't have that. How unfair is that? You cannot have that one. You got everything else. And think about it in terms of our life. Healthy people, you have a job. You might have a boss who's caring, but you don't live in the house you want to live in. But yeah, you have a house and everything works and you have dishes and you have food in your fridge. But it's that one thing, whatever it is. Oh, man, my husband gained a couple of pounds. I lack the
six pack I once
the
had.
the Adonis figure he once was,
Yeah.
and it's all these misplaced.
You've been talking to my wife.
Yeah. And that's the point, is the lack. The tree, I said the tree became the instrument to incite disobedience that they thought would lead to liberation, but yet it led to that isolation. It led to that perceived isolation, because what the beauty of the story is, even though they messed up, even though they start creating their own sort of wisdom apart, independent from God, God never leaves. God is always there to say, I'm going to be here to help correct your knowledge so that you can have wisdom. And I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. I've put a piece of me within you, so you're stuck with me. So that's the beauty of the story, is that even though we may default at times to our own understanding, God is still there to through our consciousness, through our experiences, to say, yeah, that is true, but it isn't wise. That is true. They voted for this person, or they believe this doctrine. That is true, but it isn't wise to do that in light of that information.
To separate from.
That's right, because information doesn't lead to transformation. Being in connection and community is what brings
Absolutely. Yeah, that's well said. If I'm going to... Okay, so imagine this. Tell me if this is a good example. If all the churches that separate over doctrinal differences, okay, as an example, decided that they could be unified in solving problems like poverty, hunger. Imagine the resources if they could pull together on those things.
Yeah.
Those things which you don't need a whole lot of certainty about. You don't have to debate the certainty of God's heart concerning these things, right?
Right.
And maybe it's just our human nature, or at least that serpentine part of us that that says, well, it's easier just to focus out on the things we can divide over so that we don't have to get to work.
That's right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I don't know who said it, I think it was Camus. He said, until the world comes to embrace the power of love over the love of power, you'll never see unity. Now, you flip that on theological terms, not just geopolitical terms. The religious leaders were trying to just hammer down love of the law. And Jesus is trying to teach the law of love. And he goes, you miss the heartbeat of these things. And that's the truth, man. When I was in Oxford, there was a company, an organization, a nonprofit over there. And they call them charity organizations there because they don't have political or whatever tax identifications. Oxfam did a 10-year research project on what would it take financially to take people who are in the utmost poverty across the world, across the planet, to give them what they call the basic five: food, clothing, shelter, basic medical care, and clean water, right? The five big things. And they estimated for the entire globe, it would take about $20 billion per year to give people basic needs. So again, this was probably $20 billion per year. And they said, we spend $20 billion in the U.S. on ice cream a year. And so, and again, we're not talking homes like, that are along the beach or somewhere, or even in typical Sarasota. We're talking like basic housing facilities. And you just kind of go, okay, like how do we not get this? So
Good Lord.
But
that's disturbing.
That number may be at 30 billion now. Who knows? But I'm still going. It
the
pales.
price of eggs is high right now.
It pales in comparison.
So pales in comparison.
But it's this notion of I am first and foremost, before I identify as anything, before I even identify as a male, before I identify as an American, before I identify as white, I identify as a follower of Christ. That is the preeminent identification of what I am. I am a child of God, born from love, from the being that is love. And that's the heartbeat, man. Now, have I always been loving? No. Have I always been courteous? No. Kind? No. And that's the coiled up snake within, right? And I think that's the dilemma we face as humans. And I think that's where trust comes in. There's no certainty in anything. There's only trust that this is the best way to live. And we see it over and over, man. No one celebrates in any culture two things. Cowards, we celebrate heroic feats. And no one makes a big deal other than to kind of cast some sort of political or ideological. When someone gets super rich, you know what we celebrate? When people who were down and out get helped. Like, we celebrate that, man. We celebrate forgiveness. Like when I showed that clip in church of this young man who killed this woman's son, her one and only son, killed him in cold blood for a couple of $100. And she walks into the courtroom. And he walks in, with, you could see it in the video, he walks in with this sort of
bravado or whatever.
I'm a bad dude.
Yeah.
I'm a bad dude, you know. I'm going to handle this. And she just looks at him and she goes, I'm not mad at you. I don't hate you. I want to hug you. And you see the visceral change on this guy's face, who went from this murderous thug to bawling his eyes out. Because he was loved when he did not expect it, and even more when he did not deserve it. And I'm not saying he doesn't belong in prison. Yes. But let him face the consequences of his actions, but also let him face the transformation of encountering authentic, wise love from someone who actually gets it. Like, those are the things we celebrate, man.
Yeah. That was such a great picture of the reality. I'll put it this way, that love is simultaneously the most vulnerable, perhaps because of that, the most frightening quality to take on, and the most powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's vulnerable, because love doesn't compel. It doesn't force anything.
That's right.
But nothing has the power to transform a heart and a mind like love does. That was just
instantaneous.
Yeah.
It was instantaneous. It wasn't go to church 10 times and see what happens. Try this new spiritual discipline and see what happens. It was instantaneous. I love you. I forgive you. I'm not mad at you. I don't want to hurt you. I want to hug you. And in fact, she asked the judge, can I hug him? And they said, absolutely, if he's okay. And sure enough, man. And you see, the woman, like, dude, and people will say, well, I can't do that exactly. I can't either. I love my children. It would only be under the power of God to do that.
Yeah.
And how can you deny that that's not what that was? Because
I can't.
Each one of us would go, screw that kid. Send him away forever. Punish him. Burn in hell. But yet this woman says, I trust God. So God, give me the power to do what I cannot do on my own. And I'll close with this. It reminds me of New Orleans. We're working at this little old lady's house, putting up sheetrock and blah, blah, blah. And she's living in this FEMA trailer. And we're just working our butts off. And I'll never forget what she said when she came outside and we had her house almost done, man. The next group was going to finish it. But we did a lot of work. And she looked at us. Here's a little old lady with not much education. She goes, y'all done did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I said, because we love you, Miss Guillory. We love you. And we just hugged. And that's how God's power works, dude. It's not about these supernatural miracles that we try to, well, he doesn't do that, so he must not exist. No, it is the simplicity of the miraculous that makes it miraculous. I love you. What? I forgive you. What? You done for me what I couldn't do for myself. And sometimes that's, I forgive you because I know you can't forgive yourself for what you've done. And that's the power of God, bro. It's not
Absolutely.
big, bold statements. It's doing not great things with a little bit of love. It's doing small things with a whole lot of love that changes the world.
Amen.
Amen. Appreciate you,
Love
man.
you.